Okay, I'm gonna leave my window open, hoping I don't hear a bunch of noise, ambulances and such. So let's start out talking about Terence Crawford defending his WBO World Welterweight title for the second time. This time he's taking on Amir Khan. Crawford is 34-0 with 25 knockouts. Khan is 33-4 with 20 via the knockout or via the knockout. Take your pick. So some keys for each guy. Khan has to be himself, and what that means is get off to a fast start and bank early rounds. Put some shots together. And land something early to get Crawford's attention, like he did Saul Alvarez in their encounter a few years ago. Use your hand speed and keep Crawford off balance with your movement. Don't get wild. Mix your punches. Use your strengths, in other words. Khan's strengths are his incredible hand speed, high volume combinations, good movement, and strong amateur background. His footwork is fantastic, and he has a solid jab that I think most experts, most prognosticators, whatever you want to call it, they tend to forget that. And he has a solid jab. When he uses it, he should use it in this one for sure. Another thing that goes unnoticed going back to the Olympics is Amir Khan is a very good body puncher. Ask Marcos Maidana. And Khan, I'll say part of the reason he didn't, Khan, I think, won the silver medal. He was going to people's body, and Olympic judges, even though it's corrupt, Olympics are corrupt. I mean, if it wasn't, they tended not to count the body punches at all. So he's good at body punching. So test that lean frame of Crawford's. If you remember, Terence got hit with a body shot in his last fight that stopped him in his tracks a little bit. I mean, it was a good shot. For Crawford, he could fight either style. And what I mean by style is I wouldn't be surprised if he fights a few rounds orthodox to see if he can land the right hand, including the looping right hand, like Alvarez did, to hurt Amir. Ironically, Amir hasn't lost to a southpaw as a professional. But Terence may feel he can also lead with the right hand and then throw a left hook to do damage from the orthodox stance. Crawford has a high ring acumen, or IQ, as some people refer to it. And also like Crawford's killer mentality. I mean, it's a fight in there. He wants to break guys down and inflict damage. When I think about Terence Crawford, and rarely are these two guys mentioned in the same sentence when talking about their style. Marvelous Marvin Hagler mixed with a little Ray Leonard, with all three men being great finishers. Let's look at some mistakes guys make, if you want to call them weaknesses, whatever. Khan sometimes throws punches in bunches and will either step into the punch at times or just use his arms to throw the punch. And in either case, he gets himself into trouble. When he moves in, so he's stepping into the punch. When he moves in to land something big, sometimes he gets his range wrong. And when he's in the wrong range, that's trouble. On other times, when he kind of stands flat and just throws with his arms, he gets countered. He gets countered both ways, which is right up Crawford's alley. I mean, Crawford can play the counterpuncher. So that's right up Crawford's alley. When Amir gets off and then moves out, sometimes he doesn't give angles, and so he leaves himself open for a straight power shot. He backs straight out, and you don't want to do that defensively. Ask Zab Judah versus Costa Zoo. Lastly, Khan, he gets drawn in to mix it up when he should box. And the thing that makes Amir exciting is that he loves a good fight, and he'll abandon what he's been successful with and start brawling. And he does it at the wrong time. And here, if he does it, it's lights out. He made the Lamont Peterson fight a lot tougher. I mean, he's winning. He's got his early lead, and then he just decided to brawl. Needs to avoid that. I'm not saying don't get in there and brawl. Like, come in there at times and just mix it up, but you got to be smart. Lastly, Khan's chin isn't the best, and if you hit him right, he doesn't have good recuperative powers. So we know this. For Crawford, one weakness I see, or a mistake, whatever you want to call it. I won't call it a mistake because it hasn't really. He's all right. It didn't cost him yet. Crawford a lot of times squares up, and when you do that, you make it easier. It's easier to hit him when it's easier to hit anybody when they're square, because instead of having their body turned at an angle, now they're kind of like facing you, like a stare off. Now the chest is totally exposed. The body is exposed. So that hasn't caught up with him yet, but when he does it, Amir needs to attack. Crawford isn't a defensive wizard by any means. He's not a defensive wizard in there, but it's up to the opponent to see the holes in his game and to capitalize. Crawford, in another thing, Crawford in most, if not all, his fights is a slow start. He starts slow. He's surveying the opponent. He's collecting data. As the opponent, I don't care what he's doing. You need to bank rounds. And I tell you why I'm referring to Crawford's slow start as a weakness. You never know what can happen in boxing, especially if he turns southpaw and as the opponent you are orthodox. What is a strong possibility of happening when that happens? A headbutt, right? So what I mean is, if you're up 5 rounds to nothing, like Amir Khan was against Alvarez, despite what the judges say. Maybe a headbutt takes place. We go to the cards, and guess what? Khan wins the fight. And that's the chance you take if you're Crawford. So while strategy comes into play, you take a chance giving away early rounds because one day it may backfire in that scenario. So we qualify that as a weakness of sorts. Another Crawford weakness is, or if you want to say it's, if you want to say it another way and call it a Khan advantage, is experience in a couple of ways. First of all, while Crawford was undisputed at a lower weight class, it's hard to argue Khan isn't his best opponent. Okay? On paper. Well, I say on paper for reasons I'll explain in a minute. But experience also meaning this is only Crawford's third fight at welterweight, whereas Khan has fought at least 7 times at welterweight or above. It wouldn't surprise me to see Khan take a stick and move approach, use those legs, grab when Crawford chases and gets into range, especially against the ropes, okay? Especially against ropes. Grab an early lead, start scoring and moving. Try to get it into the later rounds. For Crawford, I think he has an idea in his head that Khan will make a certain kind of a mistake. And when he does, Terence will look to add the final blow after punishing Amir into such made mistake. Okay, so it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting in this fight to see how the speed affects Terence. It'll be interesting to see how the movement affects Terence. That's why you fight him, right? Now, the reason I said Khan is the best opponent for Terence on paper is this. One question you have to ask is, what does Amir have left? I wouldn't call the one fight, he's had 2, but I wouldn't call it one fight after Alvarez. I wouldn't say he looked great. And now a few years ago, this fight would have been interesting for different reasons. But so on paper, he appears to be Crawford's toughest opponent. But is this the same Amir Khan from X amount of years ago? In other words, we asked the same questions of Tyson Fury. It's almost like Tyson Fury. He came back, had a couple of wins. And then people were like, I'm not sure if he's ready. Most people said they didn't think he was ready. And then he went out and boxed a masterpiece against Deontay Wilder. And I'm not sure if that same thing happens here, but I wouldn't be shocked if the fight went the full 12 rounds. Odds are it won't, but I would not be shocked. Okay, you heard it here. The Bob Father, he thinks this pay-per-view will sell well. It'll sell well. Well, my thing is, here's a question. If you take the movie theaters away from the Spence Jr. versus Garcia card, how many pure pay-per-views were sold? Pure meaning like people in their homes that select the order button on their cable box or what have you to say, I want to purchase this pay-per-view for $70, $80, whatever. Bob Arum is old school, but maybe he needs to talk to Todd DeBuff. Okay. In other words, if this pay-per-view does 250,000 buys, how many more would it have done if you follow the Golden Boy formula and put it in theaters? Hey, Todd the Buff, you listening? I mean, you guys have to adapt, just like you did with ESPN Plus. Now this is a pay-per-view. I thought a wise move might have been to cut a deal with the theaters. Now, I'm not in the boardroom or what have you. I don't know if it was just something that the theater was asking, something ridiculous. I don't know. But on the card, you got Teofimo Lopez, must see TV. He's in with a guy taking on. He's taking on. Speaking of sticking and moving, Edis Totley, and Edis Totley is a former European champion. He likes to get in with his shots and get out. It's just in this fight, I think he's going to do it a lot faster, and I think he's going to move a lot more in this one and try to frustrate Teofimo. So let's see. It'll be interesting to see if Teofimo can catch up to him if he takes that approach. Teofimo, do not get this twisted. Teofimo, just like Crawford, okay, neither one of them are exactly, let's say, best friends or buddies of Vasily Lomachenko. You know, and I don't care what either one of them say. They will try to make a statement on Saturday night to rebut what Vasily did last week to Anthony $1 Million Crow. And so I expect them to try to put on a show. Crawford, because he believes he's #1 pound for pound and doesn't like Lomachenko being called that, or anyone that for that matter. Even though he's his stablemate, he just doesn't dig it. And then Teofimo, who is slated, if he wins, to fight for a title in his next fight, and then if he wins that, him and Lomachenko can do it later this year, maybe in December. That's the plan. So he wants to look spectacular for his reasons, just like Crawford for his. All right, let's see. But Teofimo, like as I stated, is must-see TV, and giving people an opportunity to pay $20 at a theater, I think would have brought in better pay-per-view numbers. So I'll be wrong if I threw numbers out. I'll do it anyway. So let's just say the movie theaters give you a boost of like between 75,000 and 100,000. Let's see what the numbers look like, and then just kind of play around. That's why I wish I would to had something to compare it with. If they broke down fights where same with Jacobs and Alvarez, they'll be at the theaters at an average price of about 20, 22, 25, I think, tops. If they could break down how many pay-per-views were movie theater, and I guess, like, let's just pretend the pay-per-view is $60. So 3 people, for every third person that purchased the ticket, that counts as one pay-per-view. 20, 20, 20 equals 60. Then you got Shakur Stevenson, who's facing the toughest opponent on paper of his pro career in Christopher Diaz. Christopher's nickname is Petey Fool. And Petey Fool, when you look at it, you think pitiful. And I'm like, pitiful fighter? Man, that's the last name you want. And here's the ambulance right on time, if you can hear it in the background. I'm not sure if it's coming closer to me or further, so I apologize. But one translation of Petey Fool is cop or police. And I just found out the ambulance was coming closer. But I found out his nickname was his father's nickname. And I wonder if his father was a police officer. His father passed away, I believe. I believe that's the story. And he just used the same nickname. But those are must-see fighters out there. Shakur, Diaz, Teofimo, Crawford, Khan. But many people are going to miss, or they're going to pass on this because there isn't a less expensive alternative, a less expensive option where pay-per-view buys would count, such as the movie theater or the top rank app. You know, if it's a thing where it's like, well, you have to like if you want to watch it on a computer or such and such, it should still be a slight it should be a less costly than if you just did the pure make the order from my television by way of the box. And then maybe the most gripping fight of the night, once again, must see TV, the most gripping fight of the night, and this may be do or die for Felix Verdejo. If Felix Verdejo isn't right, and I'm not sure he is, folks, he's going to lose to Brian Vasquez. Okay, Vasquez has 3 losses, and only to step up opponents. One of those was a controversial, I think it was a split decision, a majority decision loss to Raimundo Beltran, if you remember that fight. So Felix has 1 win since being upset, and now he returns to the scene of the crime once again, Madison Square Garden. This is going to be interesting, and it's the fight that's going to open the pay-per-view portion of the show, so don't miss it. Let's move on. Jarrell Miller has failed not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 drug tests, if you count the MMA failed test. Sorry, that wasn't a LeBron James not 1, not 2 impersonation. But now, a few weeks ago, I asked why Mikey Garcia looked like he was stuck in quicksand, and why Errol Spence Jr. couldn't knock out a lightweight after knocking out like 14 out of 15 welterweights. And my answer at the time is because they did random VADA testing. Got a couple people upset at work, online, whatever. But when random VADA testing is done correctly, it is the best thing we have to try to make sure guys are clean. Now, can people beat the test? Probably, but it's the best we have. So if you are being tested and can't juice, you are not going to fight as well as you do when you juice. You get me? And that's my answer. I mean, now, have Spence or Mikey juiced before they fought in Texas some weeks ago? All I'm telling you is Mikey couldn't move, and Spence Jr. couldn't knock a lightweight out. A lightweight with 0 offense and who had nothing defensively. That has knockout written all over it. All I'm telling you is just use your brain here. I'm not saying anything. Just use your brain. All I said back then was VADA is going to expose fighters, either by popping them for performance boosters, like what happened to Baby Miller, or watch how different they look in the ring physically, or how they fight on fight night. These strength and conditioning coaches weren't around 15 years ago. You know, you did that stuff on your own or with your trainer. Okay? Not the drugs, but the strength work I'm talking about. And the conditioning. You run, you get out there and you run. Do your running. Lift your weights if you're going to lift your weights, or other and wolf type crazy stuff. Got a question for everyone out there listening. Why is boxing the only sport where you can decide to drug test or not? You could put something in the contract saying, well, we're only going to do just standard testing, which is the urine, which is a joke. Okay? Why? Any other sport, that dude shows up with the needle and the cup, and you got to give blood and urine. NFL and baseball players can't say no. They can't put in something in their contract. They must take the test or suffer penalties. Baseball players get like 50 game suspensions, I think, like on their first failed test or whatever it is. You have to punish these guys. Now, I'm talking about until punitive damages come about for what they're doing, and that doesn't mean suspending people. Oh, we're going to suspend you for a year, a whole year. We're going to suspend you for 2 years. Well, guys, most guys who juice are these guys that fight once a year anyway, or once or twice. Okay? I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about punitive damage, like hit them where it hurts, in their pocket. I'm not talking about when the Charlo brothers missed the test and I forgot, was it 10,000 or 25? I forgot. No. If your purse is 2 million, I'm fining you 1.5 of that 2 million. You understand? And so now I get the gray areas, all right? I mean, there are NFL players who know how to beat the test. I know of an NFL Hall of Famer, big time player. I mean, big time player who beat the system. I know of another guy, his thing was only marijuana though, but I'm not gonna say any names here, but and his name wasn't as big as the big time guy, but and some of the stuff they do to beat the test are sick. And one of the players whose name was in the news recently had some health problems. I'll just leave it at that, or a potential health problem. But even with VADA testing in boxing, they kind of put the start date in the contract. Remember when Spence was like, well, we'll agree to VADA with 10 weeks out? Why, like, that should have been a red flag for everybody. And I'll tell you why in a minute. But they put the start date in these contracts. And so boxers who juice, I'm not saying any names, these people know how to cycle off by the dates you give. Do you hear me? They tell you when the testing date starts. By doing so, you give the fighter an advantage, starting with camp or pre-camp or whatever, depending on how they cycle. So, in other words, if you are a guy who blows up between fights and you need to lose weight, you could take clenbuterol, for example. I'll just use that as an example. Now you're losing weight faster and won't need to worry about cutting it later in camp. Unfair. Okay? Clenbuterol also allows you to preserve muscle while losing weight. Okay? Remember how defined a current champion's muscles were out of nowhere? And I'll give you a hint. That fighter dealt with clenbuterol. Well, these guys know the dates. Some slightly miss the cutoff dates and get caught. And you can believe tainted meat crap all you want. But 2 tests were failed in that instance. And here's a before and after clenbuterol picture that should be on the screen right about now. Look at the old boy is hulked up in that picture, right? I'll leave a link to that site which talks about some of the benefits of clenbuterol. I'll leave a link below this video. If I don't add it by the first time you hear this video, then it'll be down there. But and that's where I got the picture from of this guy who is just, anyway. But a few videos back when I said it in a few videos actually, when I said 70% of the boxers out there are juicing, I was being nice just to be nice. It's probably closer to 85% of the guys out there, and guess what? I'm talking about the stars. Okay? The stars. Not the boxer who has a second and third job outside of boxing. I'm talking about that guy you pay tickets to see or to watch on pay-per-view, or that guy you pay to go to the arena to see, or the stadium. Listen, a strength and conditioning coach is nothing more than a drug dealer. So my buddy Paul Gant, Go For It Gant, his YouTube channel, Paul has some interesting interviews because he talks to football players. He gets interviews that people don't get. But anyway, he asked me about Jarrell Miller's strength and conditioning coach. Asked me who he was, and I told him I don't know, but I do know one thing: Miller doesn't need a strength and conditioning coach. He needs a damn lawyer right about now. Anyway, let me close by saying this: Gennady Golovkin, GGG, Triple G, is my guy. Okay, and he's fighting a guy named Rolls. And his last name ain't Royce. His last name is Rolls. Like, put some hot butter on a roll. But and Golovkin's getting roasted on Twitter. And I'll say two things in his defense. Mind you, he's one of my favorites, so you take that with a grain of salt, what I'm about to say. Remember Saul Alvarez's first fight on his DAZN deal? It was against a 168-pounder named who? Exactly. You've forgotten the guy's name already. It was Rocky Fielding. Now in his next fight, he's fighting Daniel Jacobs. So, if Golovkin, who deserves, excuse me, oh boy, my voice held up. I'm almost done. Now it's acting up. So Golovkin, who deserves a lighter touch, all right, beats Rolls, and then he fights a bum. If he gets by Rolls, I'll be critical of him. I will be critical. But give him this one just like you gave Canelo his, and even Andre with his first DAZN fight. Just give him his all right, give him a pass on this one. The second thing is, there's one retired boxer out there most people worship, and he signed a big deal some years ago. He didn't take on the best guys, and always found a way to fight bigger names after they were kind of past it for one reason or another. Whatever you want to, like, just if you go down the list and you look at the timing of certain things, you're like, okay, had you fought this person then, or had you fought that person then, and it's not just one person. Okay, whatever. Creative marketing. But everyone who defended this guy were like, man, he's older now. He should be able to do what he wants to. I mean, why are you, what's the word, hating? Okay. So why doesn't the same thing apply here? All right. If G gets back, if he gets past Rolls and he fights Nello right after that, okay? G versus Nello 3. Golovkin will have to be rolled to the ring in a wheelchair for his ring walk. He's old. All right? Let him make his money. Just like your boy who wanted to fight has-beens and never wases and guys with zero boxing experience, which is more criminal than anything. But then again, remember the sport we live in, or we watch. And remember the commission where the biggest fights occur. A knockout by Jacobs might get him a draw on the scorecards. All right, we'll be at Crawford versus Khan tomorrow night, Saturday night. It's Friday night right now. I'm looking at the Celtics, who, when I was just talking, they were up big on the Pacers, and now I look up and it's 1 point game. And a couple of times they were in double. They had a big double-digit lead and then another double-digit lead, and it's just a 1 point game shortly before halftime. But we'll be at Crawford versus Khan, so maybe I'll ask a few questions from somebody. I guess. It's getting harder and harder to do this stuff. But we'll catch you on the next one.